Welcome to IMPRI Web Policy Talk. I request Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay to proceed with the deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ritika, and a very good afternoon from Kolkata. I am Dr. Soumyadip Chattopadhyay, Associate Professor Visva-Bharati, and a Senior Fellow at the Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi. On behalf of the team of the Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies at IMPRI, I welcome you all to this city conversation series. Slums represents the fastest growing type of residence cluster in India. And according to the national census, about 65 million people live in slums. And UN Habitat estimates that close to 110 million, more than half of the population of some cities, live in slums. And there are definitional ambiguities regarding the term slum. It actually encompasses a diversity of housing conditions that vary in their legality, with respect to their historical origins, with respect to their social organizations, in terms of the social relations and relations to the power in the city. In India, the dense slums and peri-urban areas have been the worst hit by this COVID-19. Slum dwellers experience inhuman living condition, weak public health system. They heavily depend on informal economic activities. In fact, they have been exposed in ways that probably few other incidents have in the recent past. So the writing on the wall is clear that Indian slums are not livable. This pandemic has renewed some of the debates about how slums should be managed, how India should use this window to revision its discourse on urban plan and policies. What are the possible strategies to better prepare the slums for the current and future crisis? The Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies at IMPRI, along with IndraStra Global and Citymakers Mission International, has launched a discussion series, the State of Cities #City Conversations. In this talk series, we have been engaging with the urban experts, both from India as well as from abroad, to understand the challenges of urbanization and how to make the cities more sustainable, more inclusive. Today, we are honored to have among us Professor Mahalaya Chatterjee. She is Professor, Center for Urban Economic Studies, Calcutta University, and Department of Economics, Calcutta University. And Professor Chatterjee served as the Director of the Center for Urban Economic Studies from 2010 to 2017, and also as Head of the Department of Economics. And she has been doing some extensive research on also issues related to urban and regional economics and urban governance and planning. And today, Professor Chatterjee will speak on slum urbanization in South Asia, the experience of Kolkata. And also today we have with us Professor Shoubhanik Roy as one of our another panelist. So I welcome you, Professor Roy, as well. So again, once again, I welcome you, both of you, ma'am, and Professor Roy. So it's over to you.
Thank you, Soumyadip, for the nice introduction. And it's nice to be back with the friends talking about urban. One should say this is a full Kolkata panel. I am happy that Shoubhanik could join even at the last moment. So I'm quite happy to discuss all these things with you. Now I am talking about slums. In fact, I am working on different issues on slums for quite a few months before. Just before the pandemic started, I started to look into the issue of slums, especially slums of Kolkata, because the initiation was just to say that somebody asked me about to look into the issue of female workers in slums. We generally our perception is that the work participation rate of the females in the slums will be higher, as we always say that all our workers, female maid servants and others, they come from the slums and others. So that took me into the exploration of the female work participation rate into slums. And as it happens that when you look into one issue, you pass on to other issues. And just to say, now I am almost engrossed with slums with different issues. And also I had a stint with, or I have a very good connection with an association called Poshim Bongo Bosti Unnayan Samiti. They are activists, they work on slums. Their name was different before, but now the name is Poshim Bongo Bosti Unnayan Samiti. So and they almost accepted me as their honorary advisor. And so I am also in a bit of, apart from academic interest, I am also in bit of activism also. So my interest in slums, I want to share you some peculiarities of Kolkata slums, but I will start with India. I am not going into South Asia, though all of us know that the most of the developing countries of the world, they have one or other variation of the slum. There are favelas in Brazil, some other name in Malaysia, etc., etc. So basically, slums are taken to be as something like living quarters for the poorer people, mainly engaged in manual workers and others. In India, like many other things, slums also started as in the colonial period, and it was thought that.
Ma'am, are you sharing your presentation?
Yes. I'm starting the sharing.
Oh.
So. Uh, So, so in India, the census authorities, they define slum as the residential areas where dwellings are unfit for human habitation by reasons of dilapidation, overcrowding, faulty arrangements and designs of such buildings, narrowness or faulty arrangement of street, lack of ventilation, light or sanitation facilities, or any combination of these factors which are detrimental to safety and health. This is the census definition for the census definition for slum. And for the purpose of census, slums has been categorized and defined in the following three types: the notified slums, recognized slums, and identified slums. And as it know that notified slums, they are notified areas in a town or a city as slum as by state, UT administration or local government under any slum act. Under any act, including a slum act. And the second comes the recognized slum. I asked somebody, as you can see, these two definitions are somehow overlapping. All areas recognized as slum by state, urban administration or local government, housing and slum boards, which may not have become formally notified as slum under any act. So one is notified slum, which is notified by any law, center or state or anything. Recognized slum, that the state recognizes these habitations as slums, but they are not under any slum act. And thirdly, identified slums, they are something like census towns. They are identified by the census. They are a compact area of at least 300 population, about 60 to 70 households of poorly built, congested tenements in unhygienic environment, usually with inadequate infrastructure and lacking proper sanitary and drinking water facilities. Now, when the census gives the number of slum blocks, that is, they differentiate between these three categories. As you can see, there are notified slums, notified slums about 37,000, recognized slums 30,000, but identified slums surpasses, that is, which is not under purview of any government act or recognition of government, they are almost 40,000. And as one can understand, these identified slums are not under the purview of any government scheme for slum improvement or anything else. But the point for a problem with census data is when they give the data on slums, that is either the housing data or the PCA data or any other type of data, they does not give it in a differentiated manner. So when we look at the infrastructure or any other thing, we are at a loss. That the infrastructure, we look into the slums, look for the slums, whether they are for identified, recognized slums, which has received some sort of government backing for improvement or anything, or they are just identified slums identified by the census without any without being in the purview of any sort of improvement activity. Now this map is again from census, and it shows the percentage of slum households to total urban households, and you can see that states of Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, and Andhra Pradesh, they have the highest number of slums. They have the highest percentage of households living in slums. This takes us to we have been born on some sort of perception or myths about slums. One of them is that slum is something of bigger cities, which has some sort of colonial origin, and that is when the colonial rulers they established that cities there were quarters for the poorer people. Most of them came for search of work in the bigger cities, maybe industrial quarters and others. So what happened that they either lived in the periphery of the factories, factories like Mumbai, the towns of Mumbai and others, and also we will see kuli bostis in the jute towns of around Kolkata and something. But if you look at today's India, you will find as the data show, as the census data show, that it is not a phenomenon of the bigger cities. Slum can be found each and every city and town of the case. Now, this map shows from census data, the towns having slums in the states, and you will see of the total towns, in most of the cases, there are slums in most of the towns. In most of the cases, the highest may be in Tamil Nadu, but there is not a single state which does not have slums. Even in 2001 census, Kerala and Manipur did not report any slum, but in 2011 census, one can see that slum is reported in each and every state, and again breaking the myth that the slums are in the big cities only. You can see the slums are there in different size classes of towns, even being class 6 towns. Starting from 1 to 6, most all the states reported that the presence of slums in all size classes of the cities. And so to say, I have checked the data that in some of the smaller towns, that is the class 5, class 6 towns, there may be more than 80% of the people living in slums. In one particular city, town, class 6 town in Chhattisgarh, 100% people living in slums. Now, what does it imply? Does it imply that that the poorer people, that is, it is only the case where people do not have adequate sanitation or water supply or anything, that is the urban amenities and good living quarter? Or does it mean that that the poor are forced to create such settlements for their habitation just because the failure of our land and housing market? The land and housing market does not provide enough for the poor, which has become more clear during the pandemic, that the poor have to leave the cities, breaking the fear of catching pandemic. And these shows that the state-wise data for percentage of urban population living in slums. It is highest for the one of the most progressive states of the country, that is Karnataka. And that is followed by Chhattisgarh. So that shows the anomaly. It is not that the richer states does not have slum, only the poorer states have. Each and every state has reported slums, and if you take the average, about 40% of most of the towns, town population live in slums all across the cities of India. Again, the second myth about slums is that it is a place for it is a habitat for the migrant people, and is a male bastion. But again, we see that the gender ratio is quite high in the slums all over the country. And in some of the states, the southern states, it is maybe more than 1,000. That is, within the slums, the number of female per thousand male is more than 1,000. more than 1,000. So slum is not a place dominated by male. Females are there almost at equal number. I have seen that in most of the states, the gender ratio in slums is almost equal to the urban gender ratio. Urban gender ratio. So it is another myth that the slum is a place for men only. That is also not found from the census data. And also, if you look into the literacy rate, there also we did not find any difference with the average urban literacy rate of the states. At the states, so slum is a place for unpar admi. That is also not true. At least in today's India, the slum population is literate almost to the extent to the average urban literacy. Average urban literacy, but where the problem comes, that is also a reflection of the all India thing. What happens everywhere. If you look into work participation rate, there you can understand the so-called male domination. If you look at things, in the blues are the male work participation rate and yellow are the female work participation rate. So when we lament about female low work participation rate, very low work participation rate in India, especially in urban India, that is also reflected in the slums. That is also reflected in the slums. It's not that in the all India data, and as I will show later for Kolkata city, the female work participation rate is very, very, very low. Very low, almost, and I have tried some econometric exercise which shows that the farm work, if I take farm work participation rate is regressed by a number of variables. The most important variable is the work participation rate, female work participation rate in the state itself, except for workers in the tertiary sector, where the literacy rate becomes a significant variable. For generally for work participation rate and work participation in non-tertiary sector, the most important variable is the female work participation rate in that state. That is in the states where women, generally the number of women workers are higher. That is also the case for slums and not the other way around. Now, if I come to West Bengal, now in West Bengal, as you know, for the peculiar urbanization process in West Bengal and the other things, West Bengal is dominated by Kolkata. To be more precise, West Bengal urban scenario is dominated by Kolkata, its twin city on the other side of the river, that is Howrah, and the Kolkata metropolitan area, that is the string of jute towns, basically jute towns. Maybe there are other industries, but jute was the main industry. The jute towns those grew in the colonial period along the two banks of the river Hooghly, covering the districts of North and South 24 Pargana and Nadia in the east, and Howrah and Hooghly in the west. So the number of slums was also higher. As I have said, that these are of colonial origin. Generally, people came in search of jobs in the jute mills and the other mills that grew up in that area, and they started to live in the coolie bastis. If you go into these towns, you will see that these factories are surrounded by distinctly segregated residences. The lowest one are the coolie bastis, followed by something called Babu Quarter, that is where the white collar people live. White collar people live, but Titagore, one of the towns, one of the jute towns in the periphery of Kolkata, it's about 25 kilometers from Kolkata. Once upon a time, this was a town which showed the highest proportion of population living in slums. About 82% of the population of Titagarh in 80s and 90s lived in slums. Now that is not there, because as I've already said, that in some towns of Chhattisgarh, the 100% of the population live in so Titagarh lost this first place, but all of these towns have slums. But the problem that we did not have census data for these towns to have a temporal or something like that analysis. The 2001 census gave us data for only the class 1 towns, but it was changed to in 2011 it was available for most of the municipal towns. Now if we look into West Bengal, you will see that that most of the municipal towns have slums, but the proportion is not I cannot say that the proportion is higher in Kolkata metropolitan area compared to other towns. You will see that in West Bengal, Arambagh has the lowest urban slum population, lowest percentage of population living in slums among West Bengal towns, but the highest is in a very small, almost nondescript town of Midnapur, that is Ramjivanpur. Ramjivanpur, and for Arambagh it is 5%, and for Ramjivanpur it is about 76% or something. So for that one cannot say that the slums are present in West Bengal. Slums are present only in the older industrial towns or otherwise. Slums are found all in the municipal towns of all the 126 municipal towns of West Bengal. And as I have said, the lowest is in Arambagh and highest is in Ramjivanpur. Both are outside the so-called industrial region. So this calls for exploration, some sort of primary survey, that why there is so many slums in Ramjivanpur and what has led to the evolving of slums in Arambagh, which is basically an agricultural town. But anyway, most of the slums are here occupied. The vacancy is only 6%, and slums, as we all know, and we have already argued in different ways, that slums are used for different purposes, but it is major use is residential, but followed by many other things that shop, office, school, lodge, hospital. I'm surprised to find that census data shows that there are hospitals in slum premises, workshops, warehouses, then worship place, everything. So slums are in that sense a mini world everywhere in West Bengal. But the good thing is that if you look into the condition of houses in slums, it's the majority is good. And as the census categorizes itself, that good, livable, and dilapidated, it's good and livable. Dilapidated is a very small percentage. But if you go to other amenities, you will see that that is for West Bengal as a whole, the water supply condition is quite good, because the within premise treated tap water is available for the air, but away from the premise is near the premise and away from the premise are a lower percentage compared to the in premise. Then the source of light is mainly electricity, but there is some percentage who still use kerosene. But if you look into availability of latrines, it is again a good thing, that is mostly within premise, but of course there are public latrine, and still by 2001 census there is open defecation. And same with availability of bathroom. There is some sort of bathroom, proper bathroom 53%, and so-called in enclosure with roof is 14%. So the percentage of population having no bathroom is just 33%. And disposal of wastewater, that is again a pathetic thing. The covered drain covers only 25%, open drain 44%, and 31% live without drain. Cooking fuel is mainly LPG, again a surprising thing. Almost 40% fueled LPG, followed by coal and kerosene. Now I'm coming to Kolkata. Now, before going into that, I must say that if we talk about slum development type of things, that is the first Slum Clearance Act all over the world. Some Slum Clearance uh, Act was passed in 1956, and it was a central law. So the attitude, and if you look into our plan document, first plan and second plan, all of them identified slum as the most prominent urban problem, and the only remedy for slum was slum removal. Slum removal. Now, just to say, and we have seen instances of slum removal, the force of applied by the state in many of the bigger cities, especially Delhi. Nobody will forget the stories during the emergency and others. But West Bengal, from the very beginning, was the odd one out as far as this slum clearance is concerned. There was a very popular movie, Bengali movie, starring none other than Uttam Kumar and Suchitra Sen. Suchitra Sen, which was in 58 or 59 something, that movie that was based on the first survey, which is generally well known all over the world as the survey done by Professor Satyendranath Sen, which was who was a professor in our Department of Economics, and later he became the vice chancellor of the Calcutta University. He did that survey, and that survey was the first eye opener to the condition of the slums in the city. And this particular movie, I'm not naming it, that was based on the data from this survey, and the major theme of this movie was slum redevelopment. Where a particular slum was converted into a 5-story building, and the movie ends with the last scene was that the people from the slum, they are entering that 5-story building, and they are saying that now we will get sunlight, we will get air, we will get water, our life is going to change. But that particular model, that is replacing slums, it's not slum removal but slum improvement, that is replacing slums by higher buildings and others, that also proved to be wrong in later case, because as I have already shown that till now slums are not only living places but also working places of the slum dwellers. So there is a story we always heard from our I should not say childhood, but from the time when we started looking into urban issues, that there is an old woman whose earning came from selling the milk of his goats, and she was placed at the high story of such a building, and he said that how can I take my goats there, and if I lose my goats, I lose my earning. So that type of slum improvement type of thing, which was initiated in the late 50s in the city, that also proved to be wrong, or not beneficial to the slum dwellers themselves. But then later it took KMDA to go for in situ redevelopment of slums. That implied that providing urban amenities within the slums, especially water supply, paved roads, street lights, then public toilets and drainage. That was the KMDA model for in situ slum development, which was later taken up by Government of India itself. It was made an all India program, and the name was Environmental Improvement of Urban Slums, EIUS. But I'm not going into details of that. I will come to that. That is this typical slum redevelopment model of KMDA was discussed in many of the forums as an unique way that is not hurting the slum dwellers and others. But that is also one of the reasons. One of the reasons, which will come later, that how the slums remain to be stayed remain to be there in Kolkata. Kolkata, there are different issues talked in different forums about slum removal and other things in other bigger cities, bigger cities, the eviction and others. But in Kolkata, the slums are still there, and this is a map of the Kolkata Municipal Corporation divided into boroughs. I would like to take my discussion on the basis of boroughs. I'm not going into wards because talking about 144 wards would be something very difficult. So this is the borough map of Kolkata. This is for 141 wards, because after 2001 census, 3 other rural mojas were added to municipal corporation. So now there are 144 mojas, but census data was about 141 wards divided into 15 boroughs. 15 boroughs, of which, as you can see, this map shows the wards and the boroughs. Now, of these 141 wards of the city, 19 wards do not have any basti. But again, they are scattered all over the city. Some in the central locations, absolutely central locations, where the nature of use is quite different, different from residential. So the residential premises are also fewer in number, so are the slums. Some in the affluent wards of South Kolkata, which were developed in the first part of the 20th century. Now, in the wards with major proportion devoted to institutional uses, as in case of Alipur, where there are jails and other jails, zoo and other, those wards also do not have slums. And also some in the added area. 3 municipalities were added to Kolkata Municipal Corporation in the 80s. That is the Jadavpur, South Suburban and Metia Buruj. South Suburban and Metia Buruj are older areas, and Metia Buruj is a place for the tailors and others. I'll come to Metia Buruj later on. But the added area from the Jadavpur municipality, that has the least number of slums. So the total number of bastis in the city is 1,236. The total population is about 12 lakhs, almost equally divided between male and female. Total number of families is about 3 lakh. The average size of basti is 25,137 square meter, but the largest being in a part of Mahala, it is almost 20 square kilometer. 20 square kilometer. This is the distribution of slums. Along the boroughs, and you see the most number of slums are in borough number 7 and 8, which are almost located in the central part of the city. If you want, I can go back to the map. This is borough number 7, and this is borough number 8. Borough number 8, they contain the maximum number of slums. And this is almost the same thing, that if you look at the borough-wise slum family and population, it is again borough number 7 has the maximum population in the slums. Maximum population in the slums, followed by borough number 15, which is the Metia Buruj area. Now, this is the data about average income. Average income in the slums, you can see that varies between 2,500 average family income, I must say, average family income, and that varies between 2,500 to 3,500 per month. This data is from a KMC survey, which was done in 2014. And one can say that the average income, except for few boroughs like borough number 5, 10 and 13, most of the boroughs, the average family income is between 2,500 and 3,500. Now one can if we have the so-called price index, one can understand that if this is the family income, what is the condition of the. Then if I come to employment in slums, employment in slums, you will see that it is a male-dominated place. That is only the 10%. I have shown that the male and female population is almost the same. But if you look at the workers, it is of the total workers, only 10% is female, the rest is male. And this particular KMC survey that that lists 46 occupations in the slums. In all the slums, they list 46 occupations. There is some problem in understanding because for the male and for the female, both they have maid servant. Well, they have maid servant, and for male and female they have servant. So I have tried to put them together as domestic workers, because I didn't understand that what they mean by maid servant in male and servant in female. But if you look at the gender dimension, you will see that that the laborers who when there is no definition of labor, I understand they work as informal contractual labor somewhere. That is where the females dominate, and also as maid servants, which is expected, maid servant and servant. That's why I thought I should club them together as domestic worker, but I didn't do that. But in all others, there is clear male domination as far as the choice of fields is concerned. This is the choice of occupations in the gender dimension. These are the first, these are according to the number of workers. You will see for both male and female, service is the first one. Counting the numbers, service is the first one. Then for male, it is temporary service, and for female, it is maid servant. Then there are lots of small things which we generally put into informal sector: small shops, small business, tailor. Again, the KMC does not give any distinction between what is the definition of small business and what is business. Anyway, I understand they are traders of some form. Then tailor, hawker, shop owner, grocery, maid servant, again a misnomer, I don't know what that means. Tea shop, printing, vegetable shop, pan shop, etc. That is every sort of small business, small trading. They are the main occupation of the males of the slums. And for the female, the list is almost the same. There is some up and down, but one can see that the cook is again something which is found for female only, but not the male. Then STD booth, etc. But the service sector dominates. What type of service, I don't know. For some, there are some specification, that is workers in CSTC, workers in KMC. Then there are also pensioners. That implies that they must have worked in some sort of formal activity, because then they tell themselves as pensioners. This is again for the female, where one can see service dominates, followed by maid servant and labor. And also this survey shows the presence of child labor, so that the percentage is very small, but there is presence of child labor, and again, even as expected, the percentage for female is very low. Now, as for the amenities in slums, there is coexistence of sanitary and service latrine. Of the total type of latrines, 15% are still sanitary latrines. And as I have shown that on an average, the within premise standposts are quite high in number compared to the roadside standposts. But there are also dug wells and hand tube wells. And dug wells are surprisingly mostly along the so-called Talis Nala. That is the Adi Ganga. And I don't know why. Maybe because of some historical reasons, dug wells were there, and but they still exist, about 7,000 in number, along the 17 wards which are along the Talis Nala. And there are hand tube wells within premises and also roadside. There are the swayed and unswayed ratio is 1:2. That is almost 2/3 of the slums are unswept in the Kolkata city, and there is presence of khatals. Khatal is a term which actually means cowsheds. There is a presence of the 1,236 slums. There are 135 khatals, mainly in the eastern periphery. Now, one of my students, for his doctoral thesis, he tried to look into he did an econometric exercise for this thing. He created an index of amenity access, taking the variable, the structure of the house, latrine, drinking water, and street light. Drinking water and street light, and he constructed an amenity index for the slums, and he tried to look into the causal relationship. So he took the variables like 6 variables, and the area of the slum, average number of family members, average monthly income, number of male members of the slum who have at least secondary level of education, number of female members in the slum who have secondary level of education, and number of income earners above 18 years of age in slum. And there he found that the significant variables are the area of the slum, average monthly income per family, average monthly income per family. But the relationship with area of the slum is negative. That is, larger the slum, the lesser the access to the amenities. Access to the amenities, and average monthly income has emerged as a very significant variable, but not education. So that may show that though I have tried to argue that literacy rate is quite high, but that doesn't matter as far as their decision to live in the slums is concerned. The more important is average monthly income, because even with less amenities, they are there. Then I am coming to a very important thing. You will see that of the total hutments in the slums, they are called hutments. They are designated as hutments, not as houses or anything. Hutments, and as it implies, the kacha structures dominate the paka structures. You will see that this blue part is kacha structure, and this is the paka structure. So most of the bastis in Kolkata are still dominated by kacha structure, and they have 3 categories of paka and kacha structure. Paka 1 is the best one, followed by the paka 2, that is which has the floor, that is the foundation by bricks and mortar, but kacha devals, and paka 3 is the third one, which otherwise the structure is paka, but the roof is not paka. And the kacha, there are also 3 structures. The kacha 1 is the best one, followed by kacha 2 and 3. And here you see, even in the boroughs, the same prevails. You will see this. The other things are almost cannot be seen, but the kacha structures, they dominate. Now this takes us to a bigger question, that why in a city like Kolkata, it is still dominated by, the slums are still dominated by kacha hutments. Now, before going into that issue, which is going to be my closing remark about that, I said that that the data actually bust some myths about urban slums, that they are temporary shelter for the poor, especially migrants. They are male bastions. Work participation rate of slum women are higher, and literacy rate is low. Nothing can be supported by data, either from census or by lower survey data. Now, I try to argue that slums are there because of the failure of the land and the housing market. If we could arrange for better affordable housing for the poor, this type of slums would not have existed. Now, this particular data is from NSSO slum survey 2002 and 2009. That's the only thing I could get about slum land, and you will see that the within the gap of say 7 years, the private land, slums in the private land is increasing at the cost of slum in the private land, public land, and the unknown category is increasing. Unknown category is increasing, and others, again, I think this is something undefined, that nobody knows whose land it is. That is undefined. So newer slums are coming out in private land, and as there is no proper land market or proper housing arrangements for the poor. They are sitting down even on the private land with the fear of eviction, and that is the all India scenario. But in Kolkata, these slums are guided by a particular law which is peculiar to Kolkata. It was for Kolkata and Howrah, and now this act is for all the municipal towns of Kolkata, which is called the Thika Tenancy Act. The Thika Tenancy Act. Now, this Thika Tenancy Act in Calcutta and its suburb Howrah, there existed for many years a peculiar tenancy known as Thika tenancies. Under this structure, it was a three-tier thing. The vacant land that was owned by a landlord who leased it to a tenant. The tenant has a liberty to erect structures thereupon of temporary nature, which was referred to as kacha structures. Kacha structures. That is in this three-tier thing. That is the landlord, tenant, and the subtenant. The tenant was called Thika tenant, and the subtenant was called Bharatiya. The tenant was only permitted to construct kacha structure that was owned by the tenant of the land, and the tenant was further entitled to lease the structure or the portion thereof in favor of the subtenant, and this is called the tenant of the, as I said you, that this is the Thika tenant, and the subtenant was called Bharatiya. Until 1948, that is in the pre-independence period, the provisions of Transfer of Property Act 1882 governed the liabilities of landlords and their Thika tenants. But the first Thika Tenancy Act was passed in the Legislative Assembly of West Bengal in 1949. In 1949, and that is the starting point of Thika Tenancy Act, where you have a peculiar three-tier structure in the slums. The land owned by somebody else, the hutments constructed by another person, and this person may or may not live there, but they are lived by another group of people who are called subtenant or Bharatiya. But this particular act was thought to protect the actual habitants of the slum. But there was lot of hulaboos and others. There is a historical march of the slum dwellers to the West Bengal Assembly, which is very well documented. So there was the first amendment, which they showed the definition of tenant, and that called for a written lease between the three parties. Before that, in the 1949, there was in the actual act there was no question of any written lease or contract, but the condition of written lease or something that came in 1952 amendment. Then again within 1 year, it was again amended. Again, the definition of Thika tenant changed so that so giving the benefit to the act to the persons who have erected or acquired or by purchase or gift any structure on the land for a residential, manufacturing or business purpose. So this is to be noticed that slums were from the very beginning, from 1950s, it was thought to be a workplace also, because manufacturing and business purpose was included there. Then in 1969, again, if you remember, in 1969 there was a second United Front government was there, and they again amended the act, and the motive was to prevent unfair eviction of Thika tenants. Thika tenants using the land for residential purpose should be given the right to erect the Paka structure. So in 1969 only, they were given the right to erect the Paka structure. So from 69 to 2009, 2019, my data is for 2013. 13, one can see, and that may be the reasons of so many kacha structures. Kacha structures more than the Paka structures, because Paka structures were allowed, that is the Paka structure, especially with concrete roof and others, that was allowed only in 1969. 1969, this is very important, and in that the Thika tenant was, it was obligatory for the Thika tenant to keep the huts fit for habitation, and by providing essential amenities like water supply, conservancy and sanitary services to his bharatia. So the landlord only leased the land to the Thika tenant. It was absolutely the duty of the Thika tenant to provide all these things to the bharatia, and so on. Again, a major change took place in the 1981 amendment. And if you remember, there was a change of guard in 1977, and I have already told you that KMDA was in charge of the slum improvements, in situ development of slums, and which it was found that this type of three-tier things is creating a problem for CMDA to enter the slums for their redevelopment. There was cases where the Bharatias are wanting development. They want better water supply, better conservancy, better sanitary service, but maybe the Thika tenants are not ready, and especially the landlords were not allowing access within the designated land. So KMDA was not being able to discharge their functions of the redevelopment of slums. So in 1981, there is almost a revolutionary approach to Thika Tenancy Act. All these lands were vested to the government. There is no land, no landlord was no more there, and the Thika tenant became the direct tenant of the state. Direct tenant of the state, and there was the office of the Thika controller, and this Thika controller, I still remember those days, because this registration started in 1985-86. In those time, I just came out of the university, and we were working in for a perspective plan of Kolkata, and we used to visit this Thika controller's office, where this registration process was going on. It was almost like an Operation Borga in the urban area. Which each and every Bharatia Thika tenant was firstly recorded, followed by his list of Bharatias, and the Bharatias also could register their name. So it was going to be a permanent thing. The first motive being that the KMDA could enter for slum development without any problem from the landlord or other. And secondly, this registration at the Thika controller's office that gave away the fear for eviction. As I have said, that the most of the Bastis, when it is something not to be seen anywhere, that the central part are having the highest number of Bastis, but that has happened to Kolkata just because of this assurance of Thika Tenancy Act, where each and every Thika tenant and Bharatia is being registered at the Thika controller's office. Yes, there are different sorts of underhand activities. There are change of hand for a particular room or particular premise or anything, but the law said that everything has to be registered with the Thika tenant. Then again, there is a confusion between Paka and Kacha structure, because there are lots of litigation in the Supreme Court. It reached up to the Supreme Court. So for that, the 1993 amendment clearly demarcated that what is going to be a Paka structure and what is going to be a Kacha structure. And as I have said, there are 3 categories of Paka and 3 categories of Kacha. That was being given by this 1993 amendment. Then in 2001, this particular Thika Tenancy Act was being extend to all the municipalities of West Bengal, again for development and proper utilization of land, and of course providing the amenities of the so-called slums. Then there was another major amendment in the almost in the last part of the Lieutenant government's rule, and then that again gave a redefinition of Thika tenant, and it somehow it recognized the verbal discussions for change and others, as I was saying, that there is lots of underhand things went on. There are salamis and others. In absence of any written thing, if a Bharatiya goes and says, I have acquired this paying a salami to the Thika tenant, but I don't have any document, the Thika controller office was bound to make an investigation and give the right to Bharatiya. That was the objective. And that is up to the left front rule. The latest change came in 2019, last year only, and this is again a drastic change. It calls for a development agreement between the Thika tenant and the Bharatiya for the development of the building, for the betterment of living conditions, and the tenant becomes a leasee and the Bharatiya becomes an assignee with a payment of fee to the state government. There can be reconstruction and development of building with permission of the Thika controller, and this Paka and Kacha structure, they are going to be away because FIR as per the municipal norms are to be allowed on this Thika tenant land. So this is going to be a drastic change after the, and of course the other people, the opposition, they were saying that this will be a plea that for eviction, because the development agreement between the Thika tenant and the Bharatiya for development of buildings can mean anything. It may say that the Bharatiya is not willing to develop the building, so he may be evicted, and so. But fortunately or unfortunately, the pandemic and lockdown came after that, so that nothing drastic has happened after this amendment. But as far as my personal knowledge goes, that the so-called promoters, developers have entered in this premise. They are doing the whole thing. That is, they are making the agreement between the Thika tenant and Bharatiya, and they are in fact paying the fee to the state government for reconstruction and development with the permission of Thika controller. They are passing the plans. They are not evicting either the tenant or the Bharatiya, but what they are doing, that they are constructing apartments, selling the half of it and leaving the other half for the original Thika tenant and Bharatiya. So they are bypassing the law in this way. This process has started. So maybe that is going to the end for this type of slums in the city of Kolkata. We are yet to see. But so let me end here, and thanks for a patient hearing.
Thank you, Professor Chatterjee. It's really a very nice presentation and a very detailed presentation. So, in the course of the presentation, you have busted so many myths about the urban slums in India. First one is that the slums are not really synonymous with urban poverty. And slums are not only specific to the bigger cities. In fact, you have mentioned that with the help of census data, that the slums are present in almost all size classes of the cities. Even you mentioned that for class 5 to class 6 cities, almost 80 to almost 10% in some cases of the population, they are living in the slums. And Also about the gender ratio, yes, it is quite high in the case of slums all over the India. So it is not that the slums are dominated by male and the migrants. And regarding the workforce participation rate, you mentioned about the problematic scenario of low female workforce participation. And then regarding West Bengal, yes, in West Bengal also it's more or less it's depicting the similar situation with regard to the all India scenario, in the sense that the slums are also found in almost all the 126 municipalities in West Bengal. And regarding the amenities within these slums, yes, the conditions of housing is found to be more or less livable. The amenities are also largely satisfactory, and also you mentioned that the half of the slum households, they have access to bathroom facilities and so on and so forth. And also after that, you mentioned about the Kolkata, and there, interestingly, you mentioned about the departure of Kolkata scenario from the typical slum removal policy towards slum improvement policy, which is a kind of unique feature in a sense that it is the KMDA first who actually initiated the slum in-situ slum redevelopment program in the form of provisioning of urban infrastructure to the slum areas, which later on actually is scaled at the national level. And then on the basis of a KMC survey on 2014, you discussed about the living conditions as well as the housing conditions of the slum dwellers in the KMC areas. And yes, the most glaring fact is that that you have mentioned that most of the slums in KMC area have kacha structure, and as per your opinion, it's basically it's related to the failure of the land and housing market, and therefore you actually emphasized on the importance of affordable housing. And very specifically, you mentioned about one specific act which is very much peculiar or very much particular to the Kolkata. It is the Thika Tenancy Act, where the vacant land to be leased to the tenants who can also build a kacha structure. But again, the provision of these act actually undergoes certain changes, both in terms of the definition of the tenants and also the registration processes and so on and so forth. And finally, you mentioned about the 2019 revision of that act, in which the development agreement between, there is a provision of development agreement between tenant and the Varatia for betterment of living condition, and also it is expected to provide us some sort of cushion there to them to the eviction. But finally, you have also expressed your concern regarding the role of the land developers and their likely negative impacts on the slums. And really, so we must be skeptical about whether we will be able to see the kind of the prevalence of slums that we are now seeing within the core city of Kolkata or not. So anyway, thank you for your this very interesting presentation. And today, before putting up some of my queries, we have with us today Professor Shaumonik Roy, from the Department of Architecture, Town and Regional Planning. He is the founder director of School of Ecology, Infrastructure and Human Settlement Management, Indian Institute of Engineering, Science and Technology. So welcome you, sir. If you please make your observation, comments, any questions, any queries on Professor Chatterjee's presentation. So it's over to you.
Thank you, Soumyadip, and thanks to Professor Chatterjee for very comprehensive and kind of historical account of the genesis of slums. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So the historical, the genesis and the historical origin of slums from the colonial times in the jute mills and engineering industries in Howrah, and the jute mills on two sides of the river, and where it is landing. So I'll not go into any kind of repetition, because Soumyadip has very nicely summarized the kind of myths, and those are really very important issues, which normally we have sometimes a very romanticized view of slums, that as if slums are always in a very otherwise very deprived, depressed kind of situation. and everything is negative, and that's why people are staying in such type of condition. Yes, certain things are negative, but we have to understand the another myth which I like to, I feel that it should be debated, that and which is that slums are seen as a problem, but I personally see slums as opportunities. And our formal decision making system, our formal urban governance system, which is primarily dictated or influenced by the typical Western model of urbanization, to making everything as formal and dividing the in binaries like informal and formal, all such kind of things. So we actually tried to impose a kind of development model, which also Professor Chatterjee partially touched upon, that multi-storied developments and the slums, which are generally, which are very much grounded, and we have a lot of occupations linked to the slums, and just there in one overnight they are converted to, they are just shifted to 10-story apartments, which are happening even nowadays large scale in Mumbai, and even in a scale in Calcutta also, particularly on the under the PMOI program. Along the bypass, there are some slum renewal programs which have taken the slum dwellers from a grounded 1 or 2 storied situation to a 12 storied, which has increased their electricity bills and all other kinds of problems. Because we think that we, according to our conventional Western kind of model, our notion of development is 2 BHK or 1 BHK. So we try to define in a BHK terminology the slum typology, and we hardly think about that the slum is a place of opportunity, and that has to be really the first thing which should be different from a conventional housing program and a slum rehousing program. So that there's a myth, and probably that myth is continuing in this present context of urban development and the mission modes, the PMAY and all kinds of mission. They convert everything from so-called informal to so-called formal, and in the process they completely wanted to change their lifestyle, their economy and everything, which perhaps is not possible. And that is why we are finding this kind of mismatch or gap between the reality and the planner's prescriptions. So that is one myth which I thought that this also to be highlighted, the kind of development model which has been promoted by international, mostly through industrial development models, urban models, and also in the present version of a model of smart cities, what we have seen. So a lot of these smart cities are now evicting slums, or just, even if they are keeping it, they're further densifying it. So already they are high density, and even we have seen that the part of Mumbai slums in Dharavi and some other places, already they are the highest density of as it is in Manhattan, and now it is going 2 or 3 times or even 4 times the density of Manhattan in the slum rehabilitation schemes. And we have enough reports where we found that after the slums have been rehabilitated, all kinds of respiratory problems and other kinds of problems which are earlier not there in horizontal slum in a high density situation, that has been a new kind of issue which the slum dwellers have to struggle with. So that's one myth. I think I feel that that has to be added with the economic and other myths which Professor Chatterjee and Soumyadip also very rightly mentioned. Now I just like to give one lead from the point where Professor Chatterjee concluded about this Thika Tenancy Act, and because rest of the things are already discussed. So where probably is the way out, and what really is what should be, means she has, because she ended her presentation with a very interesting question that probably this is the end of slums in or inclusive approach to slums, what we so many years Calcutta boasted compared to many other cities. where mostly Delhi and Mumbai do not have, mostly they do not have slums in the core area, where I personally, being a believer of more of a social inclusion theory. So, really, I feel that the development models which are followed in Mumbai, Delhi, and other parts, Chennai and other places, there's a large scale gentrification happening with the people who are the slum dwellers are completely evicted and just evicted to the outskirts, and their travel distances increases, and they're finally their social capital, their all kinds of living standards are declining when they are even at a better situated in a redevelopment schemes. So what has happening, because we have done some study also in Howrah, in the that famous slum of City of Joy, that is Shalkia Pilkhana. We have done some study on behalf of DFID, and that is also a very high density Tika tenancy slum. And that study, we did it in 2013, and that probably is being further corroborated by this 2019 amendment. And what Professor Chatterjee is also saying, that same observation, that the 2001 Act gave an opportunity to the government or the state to go for some kind of planned development, which is completely different from the real estate driven plan development or the developer driven plan development, which is happening in Commonwealth Games, during Commonwealth Games in Delhi, state driven, or Mumbai, the big developer driven slum redevelopment, slum rehousing schemes and SRA schemes and all, what is quite well publicized, and its problems are also, pitfalls are also being highlighted. So probably that's a missed opportunity. To me, it's a missed opportunity. And we are really, I think even today we have that opportunity to do something in these slums, to go for some kind of cooperative approach to housing and land development, rather than business as usual, what is happening, and what Professor Chatterjee has rightly pointed out, that now the petty developers are entering, because in Bengal or Calcutta, normally these are not the places of big developers. These are all petty developers. And even if petty developers, what we have seen in Shalkia Pilkhana slum, that is Fakir Bagan slum, it's a very famous slum where this film was shot. So there what we found, that there is no large scale eviction, which was the apprehension if this act was not there. And that's why this 2000 Act came. But after this, though there was no large scale eviction, but what was happening, there were adjustments, and in the adjustments, people who are at the receiving end, like the widow family member, the very aged widows which are there, who came from Bihar, or who are a minority lady, probably she is completely at the receiving end without having any social capital. And now she was given some hope that she will be given one big two-room house, and that's completely gone wrong. And there was no, because this is a completely illegal kind of transaction happening. And that is how probably this is what even 2019, this amendment, probably it's opening a floodgate of this kind of activities of entry of petty developers in the situation, and making the thing completely skewed negatively against these marginalized, the tenants, particularly in the three-tier structure. That is actually the third tier of the tenant, who is completely at the receiving end. So there is a large amount of dislocation happening. May not be such a large scale, but most poor or most voiceless is being evicted. And because this is happening in a very fragmented way, this is not also coming in the discussion or any kind of notice of the communities also. But still, Calcutta is having a better kind of social awareness or cohesion, and still the city people have some mind, is their attitude is still not favoring a completely commercial takeover of the city or makeover of the city, what for which Bombay, other metropolises have the constituency has gained ground. So I like to end with this observation that probably this 1981 Act has given that opportunity, and that's a missed opportunity till now. And any city authority who wants to really are concerned about these areas, this is a huge amount of area. It's, I think, of the 32% of the slum land, I just have I saw that almost 20% of the land is in this category, slum land in this category. And many of these are in a very lucrative area. So there are two kinds of problems happening. One is the fragmented developments, because earlier it was a horizontal slum. Now these are small plots in 2 kata or 3 kata of land. Now we are finding 3-story development. So probably that is one thing. The one is the people who are at the receiving end and they are losing, and without any notice, they are probably being evicted. The other is the other health hazards. The earlier it was a single story and the density was less. Now the densities are also increasing. So all kinds of access to emergency vehicles, all city, the public health, it is becoming a public health issue now. So probably this I like to end with this, that that there are good examples of citywide or slum-wide integrated developments, and these are happening in many global south cities, particularly in Colombia, or there's a famous program in Thailand, the slum security program, where it is completely a participatory approach. And participatory approach doesn't mean that the developer is excluded. If required, the community will engage the developer on their own terms, but there is a role of the state. If the state completely withdraw from the process, which is what we see even in Calcutta now, this is now just thrown open to the developers, that you negotiate with individual slum, the Thika landowners or Thika second tier tenant, and you develop individual plots. And that's probably will completely waste the opportunity created by the Thika tenancy land. So there is still, I feel that there is still a scope. And if the state, if the mass organization provide, I am also in some form associated with the Basti dweller, the what is the Basti Unnayan Samiti, but probably they are yet to understand the necessity of integrated development. But in the process, they are losing really their foothold in the city. And either they are being further cramped, they're forced to come in a much more cramped situation, much more lesser amount of land, the density is increasing, and or they had to leave the place. So it's a gradual exclusion, not overnight exclusion, and that in the long run, maybe I agree with Professor Chatterjee's final conclusion that after 20 years, if this continues, probably we'll see that that whole land is, whole Thika tenancy land is taken over by individual small petty developers, and with a huge amount, with a substantial public health hazards for the city, because they are in the central area of the city. So that's my observation.
Thank you, Professor Roy, for your detailed comments. And really, there are some best practices. Best practices are not scarce, but what really is difficult to implement them or replicate those best practices in the context of Indian cities, and especially when the Indian cities are nowadays completely run by the ethos of neoliberal urbanism. Okay, Professor Chatterjee, would you like to have your respond to Professor Roy, or else we can take? We have Mr. Samir Unale sir with us, so he actually represents the administrative part. So we can have his opinion and then come back to you. So would you prefer?
I don't think I have to say something just now responding to the Choboni.
Okay.
There are also points of agreement.
Okay. Then let's move over to Mr. Samir Unale, sir. He is the Joint Commissioner of the Municipal Administration Department, Government of Maharashtra. So he is with us. So now I request Mr. Samir Unale to have his observation or any comments on this particular topic.
So, very good afternoon. Actually, very often working in cities, slums is in fact one of the major axes onto which funding, development issues, and even day-to-day grievance redressal has to be addressed. Very often, slums, sometimes, it's a bit, when you get into some contemplative times, you feel whether the slum is the cause or the effect of poverty. And these two things, I believe, the one of the options that we might choose will lead us to the probable possibilities that we will have to implement. Because analysis is absolutely required, yes, but what after that? You have to find solutions. And for finding solutions in real practical terms, I think it's better if we trust most of the people as much of time instead of having prejudice against A, B, C, or D, whatever. So it has to be rightly, as I was pointed out, that it has to be a teamwork in a real sense, that everybody will have some part to play into this exercise. We do have many international alliances in having of slumless cities and slum-free cities. There have been a long history of implementing programs for slums, improving the slums, removing the slums, or upgrading the slums. So I believe, as was rightly pointed out, we have got lots of options available, and rolling out a particular program in maybe 30,000 odd cities of the world, if you look at it, then it will have to be customized and localized. So as far as the various missions that we are seeing, I have seen examples in which both the ends of the spectrum. But then the administrator's dilemma is whether you are not going to act at all. If you're going to act, there might be some limitation. Then so what? So actually, whatever options and whatever missions, options, and various other practical abilities are there will have to be garnered and marshaled. There will have to be a greater teamwork instead of a zero sum game and I against they and that kind of thinking. And we'll have to act practically to find some credible solutions onto that. That was the first response. And as far as some, of course, I have worked in MMR in 3 occasions. Slums is indeed one of the major concerns, and finding challenges and finding solution for its removal is also a major thing. If you look at a slum for a non-academic person, he would look that yes, the one issue is the security of tenure issue is the poor living conditions. I mean, if a layman would ask to define what a slum is, I think these 2 points would try to describe it at the maximum possible extent: security of tenure and poor construction material. So in this case, when you see the energies of the community, when I say energy of the community, I'm including corporate into that also, maybe petty developers also into that, because how long are we going to find the zero sum game and without any solution? So one of the practical administrators point to be, yes, let's try to take help of everybody in this thing, and let's try to remove the 2 points. One is the security of the tenure, second is the poor construction material. And as we know, the multi-dimensional poverty definition that we still use in urban areas, housing is the most important part of it. And if the housing element is taken care of, it does leads to a better aspirational level, better performance, better these things. Mumbai, of course, had a major programs have been happening. In fact, one of the first ones to go for slum rehabilitation, one of the first one to go for even rental housing for that matter. So from the practical side, we have to find solutions. Analysis is of great help, but we have to implement. A single solution may not be immediately doable. It may not be immediately successful all over the world. But then, what options do we have? Yes, community engagement is always there. We do find it needs to be tried, but there is the complex of constructions. Technologies are so complex these days that we cannot really expect a person to do build a house of its own. So very honestly, it's a practitioner's dilemma on to how to move ahead, and then decisions are taken at the local level to the best of the abilities and available, the dynamics that is active in the cities. to resolve this very important element. But I do find that attacking the two dimensions of security of tenure and good building material, proper constructions would to a great extent help to reduce the issues of slum, if not totally solve them. So Soumyadip sir, that was a limited response really I had, because running from meeting to meeting, I still do find such interactions very important, very helpful for us, because it gives us a very different perspective which otherwise is not available to us. So thank you,
No,
Soumyadip sir. Thank
yes,
you.
no, thank you very much for just keeping some time for us in spite of your busy schedule. So, Professor Chatterjee, if you would like to make any comments to Mr. Mahalaya sir's comment or observation, you are mute. Please unmute.
Purely agree that that is the two things fulfilled, that is security of tenure and good living condition, is very difficult to find, difficult to bring them together in a situation like slum. Now, then the next question is that what is the way out? If we don't want it is to be a playing field of petty developers and making the situation worse, uh, uh, what is the way out? The government, as they have passed this amendment, uh, they have meant something. They have meant something. They are saying that this is for the betterment of living condition, and of course with security of tenure, because there will be a written agreement and so and so. But uh, but what is our fear that the petty promoters will take advantage of that, and even if in written document there are tenants and varatias in different names, that is the leasee and assignee, they may not be there, as it happened many times before, that they will leave the rooms assigned to them to other people, and they will go to another slum. The fear is always there. Fear is always there. But it is on the slum dwellers to think about what do they want. The problem is that aspirations for better living is always there, and the slum dwellers, as I heard, that they are also saying that this is good. If we can live in a 3 stories building, what is the harm? What is the harm? So they do not understand that what is going to come. What is going to come, as the middle class has to leave their things for gentrification to the suburbs. The slum dwellers, where will they go? Given their income range between 2,500 and 3,500, I don't think they will be able to spend a lot of money on transportation and others. So would that mean that slums redeveloped into multi-storied buildings and proliferation of other new slums in other parts of the city? And that is something we have to wait and watch. But wait and watch is not the right thing. If we have to act, we have to take what Professor Rai has told, that it is a cooperative, participatory approach. That is the united effort by the slum dwellers themselves. That cannot be done from outside.
Soumyadip, can I just have 1 minute to
Yes.
add to this, because this is a very interesting discussion, what normally at the end happens. I have 2 points just. One is slums are not homogeneous. That is also to be, so as we have, understand that even in a 3-tier tenancy, already there is a differentiation in terms of the tenancy and their interests. So there are different interest groups. That is one issue. So obviously we have to enhance the choices. Means the slum, the problem is they do not have much choice. Either you take it or leave it. Either you I'm giving you a 3-storied, either you take it or leave it. So probably that's one issue that you have to have a city level policy of enhancing the housing options for low income group. There may be this new vertical is certainly good, true, because that's probably bringing our faith back that yes, everybody is not looking for ownership based housing. Rental is a very important option, and entire Europe, many of my friends and even in university professors, they stay in a whole life they stay in a rental housing. And there is a concept of social rental housing. So not only rental housing for the HIG, but there's this concept of social rental, and that has become an institutional option. Means they get the discounts, incentives. The developers are also there who work in this. There's a market for social rental housing. So within rental, there is a social rental. And that's completely different from MIG rental. Even there are HIG rentals. So that increase in enhancement of choice is a very important thing, which probably is, that's what is completely missing in our development context. And the second is that, like, slums are not homogeneous. In Indian cities, slums are also invisible, because our master plans, hardly even Delhi master plan, probably are yet to map all the slum areas as part of their master plan land use. So that is also important, that the mapping of the slums, and that mapping, Bhubaneswar is doing a great thing, that Odisha, they have a land entitlement program. The
Jaga
2
mission.
lakh slum dwellers, even in this, that is being integrated in the smart city, and that is being proclaimed as a very important good practice. Because Bhubaneswar is the chosen as the second top ranking city after Pune, because of one of that convergence with this program of land, and that is probably the name is Jaga Mission or something.
Jaga
Yeah,
mission.
so they are using technology to map 2 lakh slum dwellers, and they go by alley and structure by structure mapping. So probably that invisibility also issue, the invisibility of 30% of the slum dwellers in the city development plan or land use, unless that is being incorporated, the first thing we'll miss is they are an important stakeholder in the entire process of master plan or development. So that probably also, so first is mapping is important, and then probably once the mapping is done, then entitlement can happen. And nobody is generally interested unless some very concerned city mayor or some state minister, because this is generally not a very popular thing, because this really doesn't figure in our entire dynamics of urban development, which what you say as the neoliberal model. So probably that's what really, that mapping of the slums using technology, like they are using drone and GIS and all, so that this is used as a map or a structure plan, which they can use it for uh, security of tenure and various kinds of other entitlement benefits, even ration cards and all kinds of things, because they have now some address. Now they have some address. Most of the slum dwellers do not have any address. So this is part of the identity mapping and the citizenship, their issue of citizenship and other things. Probably there lies the answer, that first we make them visible in our city plan, and then probably the enhancing the options and choices, and not just leave it or accept it or leave it kind of syndrome.
Actually, that is the point. That is to increase the range of options, for the slum dwellers. There are two questions I see. One is I can that should we change the word slum? Isn't it derogatory? Yes, slum is derogatory. Not only the word, the whole thing is derogatory in our narrative. But we have to accept the reality. And the second thing is that is, what is the alternative? We have already talked about a number of things. I must talk about the Rajiv Awas Yojana. Now this Rajiv Awas Yojana, in fact, maybe rightly emphasized on the title of the land, the proper land title. That Rajiv Awas Yojana cannot be implemented if the land title is not clear. And that was the death knell for Rajiv Awas Yojana in a sense, because the slums on the private land, that the private landowners, they are not interested in improvement of slums. Rather than they went for other types of development, which is remunerative for them. And those which did not have proper clear title, they are excluded by default. Because Rajiv Awas Yojana could not what should I say, prosper actually. I was in a television program on slums, and the questions came that we were very hopeful about Rajiv Baba's Jojona, আমরা তো সব দিয়েই দিয়েছিলাম, so we gave everything they wanted, but even then nothing happened to our slums. Nothing happened to our slums, and in most cases that is because of the if the land title was not clear, it was not charged by RAY, and if the land title was clear in the hand of a private owner, he was not at all interested. He was not at all interested. I have 2 or 3 case studies in suburbs of Kolkata, in South Damdam, in Sonarpur, Rajpur, where the owner in fact was thinking Rajiv Baba's Jojona as which is giving himself a relief from these tenants.
Yes, so yes, that is the thing. That is the thing. Our recent report by Ajivika, they actually termed this as the sedentary bias in urban policies. For example, for accessing every facilities, urban amenities or housing, they have to prove their residence. First, they have to prove that they're the citizens of that particular city. So that is very difficult, and that actually deprived them from accessing many of the services, many of the facilities which are available in the city. Okay, so now, so before going, let me now request Arjun Kumar, who is the director of this IMPRI, to have his comments, questions. Over to you, Arjun.
Thank you so much. And let me first congratulate Professor Mahalaya and also Professor Sovnik for bringing the debate so much intense. I not have much question, but I really wanted to extend the debate to the current program. We all know that West Bengal is not the part of the central what we have Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, and also we have Smart Cities Mission. There is a rift in the federal structure. But having also said that, sir also mentioned about Odisha, and we have some rental example also Apnalay from Kerala, a lot of things, but not really at scale. Even when we envisaged Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, I remember the figure of the slums which we had from census, it was around 1.4 crores, and from NSS to 2012, ma'am really used NSS data also. From there we had around 75 lakh, 80 lakh figure. But then there was a lot of thinking, and it was decided that around 1.8 crore is the slums which we need to change under this Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Let me also bring this, that the Rajiv Awas Yojana's focus was slum-free India by 2022. And then PMI came, and then also we thought that, okay, we need 2 crore houses, and of that 90% is slums. But as the PMY has progressed, our target has been reduced to 1.2 crores based on demand survey and other things. And even in that, the slum component is not even 2.5 or 3 lakh. So as we are also seeing, and that too also only few projects in Gujarat, or as Samir sir was saying, in Maharashtra, not even Maharashtra, let us say Mumbai metropolitan region. So that has been the progress which has been done so far in the aspect of slums. And what I also wanted to discuss, because now we have something called affordable rental housing complexes scheme, which have been because of the migrant exodus that has come to the fore. Nothing has been done in Surat. One project which is moving, that is also not happening. A lot of thing, ma'am also is coming from Hudko, that is being pushed. I also have written a paper that came in EPW. There also I have argued about all the features of rental housing, and then vacant housing also, and how in the slums and other things are coming, property, land market, and what kind of choices people are making. I also thought that if Mahalaya ma'am can also tell us how, because Kolkata has so many of institution, around 38, 39 of municipal bodies. So how they are looking, and ma'am really talked about socio-spatial, barrage 8, 7, so many different. Ma'am, how do you see these different institutions, municipal council and others, looking into the local economic development, or I would say well-being in their area? Is that lacking to any sort of not movement towards improvement or in these things, or does the buck stops at the state government? Because in the case of Odisha, we have many legislation and tenancy and other reforms coming up. So how do you, ma'am, see that? And in slums also, I did one study looking at the slum population in Patna. That was funded by. Okay. And ma'am, I was thinking that What do you think that we know that how the slums are formed and what are the thing? And what do you think has been our experience of slums redevelopment? Very small, but and how it can be done from the example of Kolkata, because the redevelopment and resettlement are really the most tough part for urban development and the improvement of overall cities. One thing Soumyadip sir also touched, that was on the implementation issues. Identification of beneficiary, as also all our panelists also highlighted that most of the things are hidden in DPR master plan, that is not coming, and even when that is coming, there is also post occupation issues pertaining to operation and management, and who is allotted, how many families are allotted. And then when we look into it, then one dimension again kicks in, as Mahalaya ma'am is saying that 2.5 thousand to 3.5 thousand, then how much can you contribute? So the financing and private part is then also coming. But I was thinking that, ma'am, how do you see in the case of Kolkata, some institutionalized measure can be applied so that we correct this, our sustainable habitat push, and how the targeting can be done with trust, because trust, I think, be it rental or ownership, the trust component is really not, I would say, from the leadership point of view or from the local administration or even from the people, that is not coming upon, and there has been a lot of favoritism and local politics going on. So ma'am, how do you see that the local ecology and public health and overall well-being is there, and what should be the institution and the policies for Kolkata and the way ahead for slum upgradation? Ma'am, over to you.
So
Ma'am, please unmute yourself.
Yes, yes.
there are so
If
many
you,
there are so
Many.
many questions. So if you
yes,
want, if you choose an
Yes,
answer as per your
yes,
convenience.
I have
yes,
already
yes. No,
discussed, ma'am. Yes,
no.
points, yes.
I have tried to concentrate on Kolkata Municipal Corporation only. But you have rightly said, as I have just touched into, that Kolkata Municipal Corporation is not the only one. Kolkata metropolitan area is composed of so many towns. Just now there is about 38 municipalities and two other municipal corporations, that is Howrah and Chandanagar. And each of them has their component of slums. Now, once upon a time when the CMD or KMD, that is the Calcutta Metropolitan Development Authority, was formed, one of the very vibrant department of KMD was BIMAD, Bosti Improvement and Municipal Area Development. And that tried to integrate this Bosti Improvement thing, that is what is KMD is, what should I say in today's term, USP, that in situ slum development, that was extended to all the municipalities. As the name suggests, is both the improvement and municipal area development. It is not only the slum, but the so-called area around the slum. And sort of, as Professor Shobhanik Rai was saying, it's integrating the slum people within the economy of the town itself. That was the objective. That was the objective. But as one can understand, with the forces of liberalization, all those objectives are lost. In fact, for some reason or other, I was trying to locate those old BIMAD documents. BIMAD documents, and KMDA told me that their library does not contain anything before 2000. I am so sorry to hear. I'm so sorry to hear. They said everything is well documented after 2000, but I'm sorry, from 1970 to 200, and those documents are not available. But that if you have to look into the metropolitan area in an integrated thing, you have to think in terms of something like that BIMAD approach. That BIMAD approach, that not only slum improvement, as one has to understand the changes in the demographic structure of the municipalities. Once upon a time, they were industrial towns, they were factory towns, and the slums were inhabited by the factory workers. Now, but now what has seen I have seen in for Kolkata data extensively, but that may be found in the data for the municipal towns also, that now they are not inhabited by factory workers, rather than service sector workers working in informal sectors. So their needs have changed. Needs are changing. Once upon a time, the location of the slums were very near the factories, very near the factories. Now that nearness is no more required than them. Most of them probably are traveling by the local train to Kolkata or any other bigger city near it. So that type, if somebody goes for that type of reorganization, where really the nearness to the working place, nearness to other amenities, that can be one approach. That can be a one approach. Shobhanik is more familiar with all those things, that some sort of relocation, I am not saying eviction, some sort of relocation, and based on the changing demographics and occupational structure of the slums. That is another, that can be another way of thinking about this. I'm not saying time redevelopment, but the reorganization of low income settlements, if you like that term.
Yes, yes, thank you, ma'am. One last thing I just thought to ask, ma'am, what is the aspect, or I would say the penetration of rent seeking or corruption, because many of these things are not happening, and many of the junior officers like it, the situation has to be, so there is a lot of rent seeking, and this thing also coming up, especially for the provision, as our panelists were also mentioning, for electricity, water, so many of things, because as things are not progressing, there is a lot of and finally the slum dwellers has to pay somehow, this way or other, because if the water is not coming, there is water tanker, and who likes to live in a kacha house, and even very recently also I got a chance to visit Kolkata, and I see the situation as same. The the kacha houses still are there. I would say that is a very bad blot for our Kolkata, and
City of Joy.
City of Joy, but it doesn't look good. Kolkata has achieved so much and given India so much, that I think that we should really upgrade these and make some progress there, not build wall just in front of it to hide it, but really demonstrate it. Yes, ma'am.
So now, once upon a time, we met a group of social scientists from Chinese Social Science Academy. And they came to Kolkata after visiting some of the Indian cities, and they said that why you do not have slums like Dharavi. Why Kolkata doesn't have slums like Dharavi? Now that is one of the good things about Kolkata, that Kolkata was very inclusive for the from the very beginning. You haven't seen if yes, bastis are there, as I have said, that almost 12 lakh people live in bastis, but the bastis were not so prominently different from the so-called middle class habitat. Middle class habitat. So bastis were there, and there was some sort of synergic type of thing going on between the bastis and others. As we have said, that we have always thought that our maid servants come from our local bastis. But now the place where I live, almost in the central part of the city, the city, we see all of them coming from suburban areas, especially from the what we call the south section, through the Baligan station and others. And when I looked at this particular KMC data, I actually found there is not a single female worker in the bastis of my ward. My ward. There are say about 10 slums in my ward, but not a single female worker. Single female worker. And that what we understood during the pandemic. During the pandemic, whenever I search for, I'm not talking about domestic workers, but whenever I search for an electrician, I search for a plumber, everybody said they are coming from faraway places. They are coming from faraway places, so they cannot come in during the lockdown. During the lockdown, all such small shops were closed till the public transport was allowed. So that is, in that sense, we are ignoring our necessity for these people, for this type of workers, and in that case, the pandemic is a good thing in a sense. The silver lining is that we are thinking of affordable rental housing and another thing, and the right of the people of this type of people for the city. And so So it's not only for Kolkata, but it is for whole of India, that this particular model of urbanization that we are taking from this lower income people, and we are not giving back anything, we are pushing them out. This should be stopped, and we should think of some other model, other model in any form or other.
So thank you, thank you. So I think today's discussion is very much stimulating as well as insightful. Now, it seems that it is really and indeed an opportune time for co-creating every steps, right from the ideas, the strategies, the implementation mechanisms, the financial solutions inherent in any urban plan through an extensive consultation process with the people. And also some special emphasis should be placed on access to affordable housing. Once again, on behalf of Team IMPRI, I'm thankful to our panelists, Professor Mahalaya Chatterjee, Professor Shovanik Roy, Mr. Samir Unale, and we have been organizing this city conversation series for the last 2 months or so, and we have many future events in the future as well. So we expect Professor Chatterjee and Professor Roy to have you in our future program as well.
Sure.
So once again, thank you very much.
Yes, and since ma'am said Baliganj,
Thank you.
yes, I'm feeling very hungry. Very good food when we visited.
Yes, Kolkata is a place for foods, not only slums.
Baliganj also very good restaurant. Yes,
All
thank
over
you.
Kolkata, all over Kolkata, you'll find very good places. And the next time you come to Kolkata and tell me, I will
Yes.
take you some good eateries.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
so
ma'am.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
nice
you.
Have a
Thank
nice
you.
evening.
Professor Sami.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
nice evening. Yeah.